Ambassador Dae-jung Kim sat in the massive council chamber and felt tired. Not the good kind of tired that comes after hard work. This was the tired that came from being ignored for years. He was 62 years old now. He had spent the last 15 years trying to make other species in the galaxy listen to humans. Today he realized it was pointless. The Grand Galactic Council Chamber was enormous. It could hold representatives from over 200 different species. Some sat in chairs. Some floated in special tanks. Some appeared only as holograms because their bodies could not survive in normal atmosphere. The chamber was built to show how great and powerful the council was. Dae-jung thought it just showed how much they loved showing off. Humans had been part of the council for 47 years. When Earth first made contact with alien life, humans were excited. They thought they would make friends. They thought they would learn amazing things. They thought the galaxy would welcome them. They were wrong about that last part. The older species treated humans like children. Sometimes they treated humans like pets. The Thraxians were tall reptile creatures who had ruled parts of the galaxy for thousands of years. Their leader, High Counselor Vreth, looked at humans the way a rich man looks at a beggar. The Quellans were insect-like beings who controlled vast territories. Their representative, emissary Talus, called humans dangerous and primitive whenever he got the chance. Today was supposed to be about justice. 3 human colony worlds were in danger. These colonies had been built legally 20 years ago. Humans had followed all the rules. They had checked all the records. They had made sure no one else claimed that space. Now the Quellan Empire said those worlds belonged to them. They said they had ancient claims from thousands of years ago, before humans even had space travel. Dae-jung had brought proof that the Quellan claims were false. Human scientists had dug up old records. They had found maps and documents. Everything showed that the Quellans had never lived on those worlds. Dae-jung had prepared his presentation carefully. He had practiced his speech. He thought that facts would matter. He was wrong about that too. When Dae-jung started presenting his evidence, the other species barely listened. Some talked among themselves. Some looked at their datapads. High Counselor Vreth actually yawned. When Dae-jung showed the ancient maps that proved humans were right, Vreth interrupted him. The Thraxian's voice was cold and mocking. He said the human evidence was amusing. He said humans should be grateful that elder civilizations were willing to guide them. He said humans did not understand how the galaxy really worked. Around the chamber, other species made sounds that might have been laughter. Emissary Talus spoke next. The Quellan called humans expansionist warmongers. He said humans were trying to take over the galaxy. He said humans could not be trusted. This was strange because human military forces were small. Humans mostly defended their own territory. They had never started a war with another species. But facts did not seem to matter today. The vote came quickly. 187 species voted against humanity. Only 4 voted in favor. The council ordered humans to evacuate all 3 colony worlds within 30 days. Thousands of human families would lose their homes. Years of work would be lost. All because the council did not care about justice. They only cared about keeping the powerful species happy. Dae-jung stood up slowly. Captain Hana Choi, who commanded the human diplomatic ship, watched him carefully from the visitor section. She had been a military officer before becoming a ship captain. She knew what angry humans looked like. Dae-jung looked very angry, but he also looked calm. That was more dangerous. Dr. Ji-won Park sat next to Hana. Ji-won was young, only 29. She had studied alien cultures and biology. She had believed that understanding between species was possible. She had believed that knowledge and respect could bridge any gap. Now she watched her mentor stand before a council that had just proven her wrong. Dae-jung's voice was quiet at first. He thanked the council for making everything clear. He said he finally understood where humanity stood. Then his voice grew stronger. He announced that humanity was withdrawing from all council treaties immediately. Humans would recall every ambassador. They would end every trade agreement. They would leave every mutual defense pact. The council chamber erupted in noise. Some species seemed shocked. Most seemed amused. High Counselor Vreth actually laughed out loud. His voice boomed across the chamber. He asked what humans thought they would do. He asked if primitive apes would throw rocks at the galaxy. Other counselors laughed with him. Dae-jung waited for the laughter to die down. When he spoke again, his words were careful and precise. He said humans had come to the galaxy in friendship. Humans had offered cooperation in technology and culture. The galaxy had repaid them with contempt. Fine. The galaxy wanted humans gone from their affairs. Now they would get exactly what they wished for. He looked around the chamber one last time. His eyes met those of a few species who looked uncomfortable. The Pelthani were bird-like creatures who had always been polite to humans. Their representative looked worried. The Ordathi were crystalline beings who valued fairness. Their senator seemed troubled. But they had still voted against humanity. Daejung's final words were cold and clear. He told the council to remember this moment. He told them to remember that they had chosen this path. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. Hana and Ji-won followed him. No one tried to stop them. No one apologized. The laughter continued. On the ship going back to human space, Ji-won cried. She had spent years studying alien cultures. She had learned their languages and customs. She had believed in the dream of galactic unity. Now that dream was dead. Hana put a hand on her shoulder but said nothing. What could anyone say? Daejung sat alone in his quarters and sent messages to Earth. He told the government what had happened. He told them the council had made their choice. Now humanity needed to make their own choices. He recommended complete withdrawal. Let the galaxy see what it was like without humans. As their ship jumped to faster than light speed, leaving council space behind, none of them knew what would come next. They did not know that the galaxy was about to learn a very expensive lesson. They did not know that human patience had been the only thing holding together systems that the council did not even know existed. Back on Concord Prime, the council station, the meeting continued. They discussed other business. They made other decisions. High Counselor Vreth told everyone not to worry about the humans. He said they would come crawling back within a month. Humans needed the council more than the council needed humans. Everyone agreed with him. They were all wrong. But they would not realize that for months. By then it would be too late to take back their mockery. By then the galaxy would be paying a price that none of them had imagined possible. By then they would understand that dismissing an entire species had consequences. The human ship sailed through the darkness between stars. Inside, 3 people carried the weight of their species' rejection. They did not know they were also carrying something else. They were carrying the galaxy's future. And that future had just changed in ways no one could predict. 6 months passed since humans left the council. Admiral Minho Song stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the last human outpost power down. His crew had spent weeks dismantling equipment and moving people. Everything valuable came with them. Everything else was left dark and empty. Minho was 45 years old and had served in the human fleet for 20 years. He had always believed in cooperation with other species. Now he believed in protecting human interests first. The council had taught him that lesson well. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human trade ships stopped running their routes. Human technicians left communication relay stations. Human medical staff departed from joint research facilities. Human peacekeepers pulled back to their own borders. It happened quietly and efficiently. Humans did not make threats or demands. They simply left. At first, the other species celebrated. The Quellan Empire moved into the 3 disputed colony worlds. They found the settlements intact but stripped of technology. Buildings stood empty. Fields were planted but not harvested. It was like humans had simply vanished one day. Emissary Talus declared it a great victory. Then the problems started. Small things at first. Cargo shipments between major trade hubs took longer. No one knew why at first. Then someone realized that human ships had carried a lot of the cargo. They had taken routes other species thought were too dangerous or not profitable enough. Now those routes had no ships. Communication networks began failing. Messages between distant systems took days instead of hours. Sometimes messages did not arrive at all. Engineers discovered that humans had been maintaining dozens of relay stations. These stations were in boring locations that no one else wanted to staff. Now the stations sat empty and the network fell apart. Professor Yuna Kang worked in the human government now. She was an expert on galactic economics. She had predicted these problems months ago. She sat in a meeting with President Yoonji Bayek and showed her analysis. Humans had been the connective tissue of galactic civilization. While other species competed for glory and status, humans had done the boring work. They ran trade routes that barely broke even. They maintained infrastructure in remote locations. They volunteered for administrative jobs that others considered beneath them. They mediated minor disputes before they became major problems. President Bayek listened to Yuna's report with a grim expression. She was 53 years old and had been president for 6 years. She had tried to maintain good relations with the council. Now she focused on protecting humanity's interests. If the galaxy was falling apart without them, that was the galaxy's problem. On the Pelthani homeworld, Chancellor Oryx faced angry merchants. The Pelthani were bird-like beings who depended heavily on trade. Their economy was suffering. Ships could not find safe routes. Communication with distant markets was unreliable. Prices were rising. Oryx had voted against humanity at the council. Now he was paying for that vote. He called an emergency meeting with other trade ministers. They tried to organize new shipping routes. They tried to hire more pilots. But many pilots refused to fly routes that humans had protected. Those routes were dangerous now. Pirates operated freely in areas where human peacekeepers once patrolled. Commander Zeth of the Kryn military discovered similar problems. The Kryn were amphibious beings with a powerful fleet. But their fleet was designed for war, not peacekeeping. Zeth's ships had to spread across twice as much territory now. They could not be everywhere at once. Small conflicts erupted in border regions. Conflicts that human peacekeepers would have prevented. The translation protocols failed next. For decades, the galaxy had used a unified system that let all species communicate easily. Humans had developed much of that system. They had volunteered countless hours improving it. Now the system crashed regularly. Species had to go back to using expensive bilateral translators. Simple conversations became complicated. Medical supply chains showed strange gaps. Certain medicines became scarce. Certain medical isotopes cost 50 times more than before. Researchers discovered that humans had been producing these items cheaply and efficiently. Other species could make them too, but not as well and not as cheaply. The council convened to discuss what they called temporary disruptions. High Counselor Vreth insisted everything would stabilize soon. He forbade anyone from officially contacting humanity. That would show weakness, he said. The council had to maintain its dignity. Chancellor Oryx stood up and spoke carefully. He said Pelthani merchants were struggling. Trade routes were dangerous without human protection. Could the council assign more peacekeepers? Vreth dismissed the concern. He said the Pelthani should hire better pilots. Commander Zeth reported that pirate activity had increased by 300%. Could the council organize a joint anti-piracy fleet? Vreth said the Kryn should patrol better. Zeth sat down frustrated. His people were dying, trying to cover territory that was too vast. More problems emerged. Resource extraction slowed in dangerous nebulas that humans had mined safely. Entertainment and cultural exchanges dried up without human translators and guides. Scientific cooperation stalled without human administrators coordinating research. Senator Vornt of the Ordathi watched all this with growing alarm. The Ordathi were crystalline beings who valued logic and fairness. Vornt had voted against humanity at the council because she had to follow her government's orders. Now she regretted that vote deeply. She requested a private meeting with other concerned senators. They met in a secure room away from Vreth's supporters. They counted the problems. They calculated the cost. The numbers were frightening. The galaxy had depended on human labor far more than anyone realized. Admiral Song received intelligence reports about the galaxy's troubles. His analysts compiled detailed assessments. The situation was deteriorating faster than expected. Some human officers suggested offering help. Song refused. The council had made its choice. Humans would focus on their own prosperity now. In human space, life improved. Without the constant burden of supporting galactic infrastructure, humans invested in their own systems. Technology advanced rapidly. Colonies expanded. Trade within human territory flourished. People who had felt unappreciated for years now felt valued. Dae-Jung Kim, now retired, watched news reports from his home on Earth. He saw footage of the struggling galaxy. Part of him felt vindicated. Another part felt sad. He had wanted cooperation, not this. But the council had refused to treat humans as equals. Now they were learning what equality actually meant. Young Jiwon Park worked at a university now teaching xenobiology. Her students asked if humans would ever rejoin the galactic community. She told them honestly that she did not know. She said the galaxy needed to learn respect first. Until then, humans would protect themselves. As months passed, the galaxy's problems multiplied. Small issues became larger issues. Economic problems created political tensions. Political tensions created security threats. The system was unraveling thread by thread, and humans watched from behind their borders, safe and increasingly prosperous. High Counselor Vreth still refused to admit anything was wrong. He blamed other species for their problems. He blamed poor planning and bad luck. He blamed everyone except himself and his decision to dismiss humanity. Pride prevented him from seeing the truth. Pride prevented the whole council from seeing what was coming next. The galaxy had pushed away the species that held it together. Now it was falling apart, and the falling had only just begun. 1 year after humanity left the council, the galaxy faced its first major crisis. A plague broke out in the Quellan colonies. The same colonies they had taken from humans. The disease spread fast through their populations. Thousands died in the first week. Dr. Sujin Lee watched reports about the plague from her laboratory on Earth. She was a medical researcher who had spent years working with other species. She had coordinated galactic disease response programs. The council had shut down those programs when humans left. Now people were dying. Sujin recognized the disease immediately. She had seen it before. 15 years ago, human colonies had faced the same plague. Human scientists had developed a cure. The cure was in human medical databases. Any species could have accessed it when humans were part of the council. Now those databases were closed to outsiders. She sent a report to President Bayek. The report explained the situation. It included the cure. It asked if humanity should offer help. Bayek read the report and made a hard decision. She said no. The council had made it clear they did not want human involvement. If they wanted the cure, they could ask for it. Bayek would not beg them to accept help. The plague spread along trade routes. Ships carried it from system to system. Dozens of species became infected. The Quellans tried to develop their own cure but made little progress. The disease mutated faster than their research. Death counts climbed into the hundreds of thousands. Meanwhile, economic collapse accelerated. The Morvani merchant concordat had been wealthy for centuries. They were squid-like beings who controlled vast trading networks. Now their networks were failing. Merchant Prince Clath watched his fortune disappear. Clath investigated what went wrong. He discovered something shocking. Humans had been secretly mediating thousands of trade disputes every year, small disagreements between species that could have turned into larger conflicts. Human diplomats had quietly resolved these issues before they escalated. Without human mediators, minor disagreements now became embargoes. Embargoes became boycotts. Boycotts became trade wars. Species that had cooperated for decades stopped doing business. Ancient grudges resurfaced. The economic system fractured along old fault lines. Clath went public with his findings. He appeared before the council and accused them of destroying galactic prosperity. He showed financial records proving that human intermediaries had been essential. High Counselor Vreth dismissed him as a failed businessman looking for excuses. Resource shortages emerged next. Rare elements that humans had mined from dangerous locations became scarce. Other species could mine these elements too, but they lacked human expertise and efficiency. Mining accidents increased. Production dropped. Industries that depended on these materials struggled. The cultural impact hit harder than expected. Entertainment dried up. Art exchanges stopped. Music and literature that had crossed species barriers disappeared. Humans had been translators and cultural guides. They had helped different species understand each other's art. Without them, cultures retreated into isolation. Senator Vornt watched all this with growing desperation. She knew the council had made a terrible mistake. She knew they needed to fix it. She proposed sending a diplomatic mission to humanity, not to apologize exactly, but to reopen dialogue. High Counselor Vreth refused angrily. Vreth's government had staked everything on the anti-human position. The Thraxian public believed humans were dangerous upstarts who needed to be controlled. If Vreth admitted error now, his government would fall. He would lose power. So he doubled down instead. He declared that the galaxy's problems were temporary. He blamed weak species who could not adapt. He insisted the council would emerge stronger without human interference. Many council members believed him because they wanted to believe him. Admitting the truth was too painful. Border wars erupted. In regions where human peacekeepers once maintained order, violence broke out. The Quellan Empire invaded Pelthani territory, claiming they needed resources because of the plague. The Pelthani fought back. Thousands died in the first battles. The Kryn Collective saw opportunity in chaos. They mobilized their fleets for war. Commander Zeth received orders to seize disputed territories. He felt sick about it. He knew these conflicts would not have happened if humans were still maintaining peace. But he followed orders. Director Sung-Ho Nam worked for Human Intelligence Services. His job was monitoring galactic developments. His analysts produced reports that became more alarming each week. The galaxy was fragmenting. Centuries of cooperation were unraveling. Multiple wars seemed inevitable. He briefed President Bayek and her cabinet. Some officials argued humans should intervene. They said letting billions die was immoral. Others argued the galaxy had made its choice. Humanity had no obligation to save species that had rejected them. Beck listened to all sides. She made her decision clear. Humanity would defend its citizens and its interests. Nothing more. The galaxy had treated humans with contempt. Now the galaxy could solve its own problems. If that seemed cold, well, the Council had been cold to humanity for decades. Some humans felt guilty about this decision. Dr. Ji-Won Park was one of them. She taught her students about alien cultures. She showed them footage of suffering populations. She asked if humans had a moral duty to help. Her students were divided. Half said yes, half said no. The plague worsened. It reached pandemic levels. Entire planets went into quarantine. Medical systems collapsed under the strain. Species that had advanced medicine for their own biology struggled with a disease that affected multiple species differently. Dr. Lee developed detailed treatment protocols. She shared them with President Bayek. Beck filed them away. If the Council asked for help, these protocols would be ready. But the Council had to ask first. Humanity would not volunteer aid to those who had mocked them. Senator Vorendt built a coalition of concerned species. 40 different species agreed that the Council's current path led to disaster. They signed a joint statement calling for reform and reconciliation with humanity. High Counselor Vreth responded by expelling them from the Council. Vorendt and her allies formed the Union of Independent Systems. They immediately requested dialogue with humanity. President Beck agreed to talk but made no promises. The Union would have to prove they were different from the Council. Admiral Song oversaw human military preparations. He did not expect war, but he prepared for it anyway. Human shipyards worked around the clock. New weapons were developed and tested. If the galaxy turned hostile, humanity would be ready. The galaxy balanced on the edge of complete collapse. Economic failure fed political instability. Political instability fed military conflicts. Military conflicts fed more economic problems. The spiral went down, and at the center of everything was a simple truth. The Council had built their civilization on a foundation of arrogance. They had assumed their superiority made them essential. They had assumed humans needed them more than they needed humans. They had assumed wrong. Now they were paying the price, and the price kept going up. 18 months after humanity left, the galaxy burned with war. The Quellan-Pelthani conflict spread across 15 star systems. Billions died in the fighting. Billions more became refugees. Ancient weapons that had not been used in centuries came out of storage. Species discovered they still knew how to hate each other. Ambassador Da-Yun. O represented humanity in negotiations with the Union of Independent Systems. She was 36 years old and had worked in diplomatic services for 10 years. She had watched the Council dismiss humanity. Now she made sure no one would dismiss them again. The Union sent representatives to human space. They came respectfully, not with demands. Senator Vorendt led the delegation. She did not ask for forgiveness. She did not make excuses. She simply presented facts. The galaxy was dying. Billions would perish without help. She asked if humanity could provide limited assistance. Da-Un brought their request to President Bayek. The cabinet debated for days. The Union had broken away from the Council. They had stood up for what was right, even when it cost them. They deserved consideration. But helping them meant getting involved in galactic affairs again. President Bayek made her decision. Humanity would establish limited trade with the Union. They would share some intelligence about security threats. But there would be no military alliance. Humans would not fight the galaxy's wars. The Union accepted these terms gratefully. This partial reconciliation enraged High Counselor Vreth. His remaining council members were hardliners who shared his views. They saw the Union's cooperation with humanity as betrayal. They saw humanity's success as an insult. Emissary Talus proposed a solution that seemed logical to them. Talus argued that humanity had orchestrated the entire crisis. He said humans had deliberately created chaos to weaken the galaxy. He said humans were preparing to conquer everyone. The evidence was obvious, he claimed. The galaxy fell apart exactly when humans left. That could not be coincidence. Fleet Commander Thrix supported this theory. Thrix was a Quellan military officer trained by Talus. He believed humans were dangerous. He proposed a preemptive strike. Destroy human military capability before they could attack. The Council hardliners agreed. They assembled a fleet of 300 warships, the largest military force the Council had ever gathered. Ships from a dozen species joined together under Council command. Their mission was simple: cross into human space, destroy human military assets, force humanity into submission. They expected quick victory. Humans were newcomers to the galaxy. Their technology was primitive compared to elder species. Their military was small. The Council fleet would overwhelm them easily. Then the galaxy could return to its proper order with humans properly controlled. The fleet crossed into human territory at a location called Proxima Gate. Human sensors detected them immediately. Admiral Minho Song received the alert in his command center. He had been expecting something like this. Humans had not spent 18 months idle. They had prepared for exactly this scenario. Song's response was calm and measured. He deployed 60 human warships to meet the Council fleet. His officers questioned this. 300 enemy ships against 60 seemed like suicide. Song told them to trust the plan. Human ships had changed in ways the Council did not understand. The Battle of Proxima Gate began at a 600 hours Galactic Standard Time. The Council fleet approached in traditional formation. Large capital ships in front, smaller vessels supporting. They moved slowly, confidently, expecting human ships to flee or surrender. Human ships moved differently. They were smaller and faster. They did not form traditional battle lines. Instead, they scattered across space in patterns that seemed random. When the Council fleet opened fire, most of their shots missed. Then human ships returned fire. Their weapons were different. Not more powerful necessarily, but more precise. Human targeting systems had been refined through 47 years of careful study. Humans had watched every species' military tactics. They had analyzed every weakness. Now they exploited everything they learned. Human ships used technologies the Council had dismissed as commercially focused: advanced sensors, powerful computers, efficient engines. Things that did not seem military became devastating in combat. Human pilots fought with coordination that shocked their enemies. They moved like they could read each other's minds. General Tai Yang Xin commanded ground forces, but he watched the space battle closely. He was 51 years old and had planned human defensive strategies for years. He knew the Council thought humans were primitive. That mistake would cost them everything. The Council fleet tried to adjust. Fleet Commander Thrix issued new orders. Concentrate fire. Focus on individual human ships. Destroy them one at a time. But human ships were too fast. They attacked from unexpected angles. They used the debris from destroyed Council ships as cover. 2 hours into the battle, the Council had lost 50 ships. Human losses were minimal. 3 ships damaged, none destroyed. Thrix could not understand it. His fleet was larger and better armed. Why were they losing? The answer was simple. Humans had learned from 47 years of being underestimated. They had studied every species carefully. They had revealed little about their own capabilities. They had prepared for betrayal. While the Council assumed superiority, humans built weapons and tactics to counter that arrogance. 4 hours into the battle, the Council fleet was in chaos. Ships tried to retreat, but human forces controlled the space lanes. More Council ships fell. Explosions lit up space. Distress signals filled communication channels. Thrix realized his fleet was being destroyed. He ordered full retreat. Whatever ships could escape should run immediately. About 120 ships managed to withdraw. 180 were destroyed or disabled. The Council had lost 60% of its fleet. Human casualties remained minimal. Admiral Song stood on his bridge and watched the enemy flee. His officers wanted to pursue. They could destroy the entire Council fleet if they chased. Song refused. President Bayek had been clear about this. Defend human territory. Do not invade others. Show strength but not aggression. The human fleet held position at Proxima Gate. They repaired their damaged ships. They recovered escape pods, including Council survivors. They treated prisoners well. They sent a message to the Council. The message was simple. Humanity would defend itself, attack us again and face the same result. But we seek no conquest. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. Species were shocked. The Council fleet had been destroyed by a smaller human force. The primitive species had won decisively. Everything the Council had believed about human weakness was wrong. Senator Vornt watched reports of the battle with mixed feelings. She was glad humans had defended themselves. She was horrified by the losses. She was grateful that humans had not pursued the fleeing ships. Humanity showed restraint when they could have shown vengeance. That said something important about their character. In the remaining Council, panic set in. High Counselor Vreth tried to spin the defeat as a tactical withdrawal. No one believed him. His government began to collapse. His own people demanded answers. Why had he attacked a species that only wanted to be left alone? Why had he led them to disaster? The galaxy stood at a crossroads. The Council had proven it could not maintain order. The Union offered an alternative but lacked resources. Humanity had proven its strength but stayed behind its borders. The old order was dead. What would replace it remained unclear. But one thing was certain. No one would ever dismiss humans as primitive again. 2 years after humanity left the Council, the galaxy faced total collapse. The wars that started as border conflicts now consumed entire regions. The plague that began in Quellan territory now infected hundreds of worlds. The economic problems that seemed manageable had become catastrophic. Billions were dying. President Yunji Bayek sat in her office on Earth and read casualty reports. Each number represented lives lost. Species that had dismissed humanity now suffered terribly. Part of her felt vindicated. The Council had brought this on themselves. But another part of her felt the weight of all those deaths. Dr. Jiwan Park requested a meeting with the president. She came with footage and data. Images of dying children on Pelthani worlds, refugee camps overflowing with displaced families, medical facilities collapsing under impossible burdens. These were not politicians or soldiers. These were innocent people paying for their leaders' mistakes. Jiwan was 31 now. She had grown harder in the past 2 years. She no longer believed in easy cooperation between species, but she still believed in basic compassion. She argued that humanity had proven its point. The Council had learned its lesson. Now humans needed to decide what kind of species they wanted to be. President Bayek listened carefully. She asked Jiwan a hard question. If humanity helped now, what would change? Would the galaxy suddenly respect humans, or would they take the help and return to old patterns? Jiwan admitted she did not know. But she said letting billions die to prove a point seemed wrong. Meanwhile, the Council itself collapsed. High Counselor Vreth was arrested by his own government. The Thraxian people blamed him for the disaster. He faced trial for crimes against the state. In his final public statement, he admitted his actions had led to catastrophe. But even then, he blamed human stubbornness more than his own arrogance. The Council fragmented into competing factions. Some species tried to maintain the old system. Others joined the Union. Many simply withdrew to protect their own territories. The institution that had governed the galaxy for thousands of years effectively ceased to exist. Senator Vornt led the Union in desperate attempts to prevent total civilizational collapse. Her coalition now included 70 species. They tried to organize humanitarian relief. They tried to negotiate peace between warring factions. They tried to coordinate medical responses to the plague. But they lacked resources and authority. Vornt made a difficult decision. She would send a delegation to Earth, not to demand anything, not to apologize, though apologies might come later, simply to present the reality. Billions would die in the next year without help. She would give humanity information and let them choose. The delegation arrived at Earth with minimal ceremony. They met with President Bayek in her office, not in a grand hall. Vornt spoke plainly. The galaxy was dying. The Union could slow the collapse but not stop it. Only humanity had the resources and knowledge to prevent mass extinction. She did not ask for free help. She offered to pay whatever price humanity demanded. Territory, resources, political concessions, anything. Beck listened without expression. She told Vornt she would need time to consult with her government. Vornt said she understood. Then she left. Beck called her advisors together. She also invited retired Ambassador Dae-jung Kim. Kim was 64 now. He had spent the last 2 years trying to forget the council. But he still cared about the galaxy even after everything. The debate was fierce. Admiral Song argued against intervention. The galaxy had made its choice. Humans had no obligation to save them. Helping now would just enable the same bad behavior later. Better to let the old system die completely. Dr. Park argued for limited humanitarian aid, not to save the council or restore the old order, but to prevent the deaths of billions who had done nothing wrong. She showed images of suffering civilians, children who did not choose their governments, refugees who just wanted safety. General Shin argued for conditional help. Provide aid only to species that agreed to reform. Make them sign treaties guaranteeing human rights and equality. Use this crisis to build a better system. Do not waste the opportunity. Ambassador Kim surprised everyone by arguing for intervention. People expected him to be bitter. He was bitter, but he said something important. Humans had left to teach a lesson, not to watch civilizations die. They had proved their point. The galaxy knew now that humans were essential. The question was what came next. Kim said humans needed to decide their identity. Were they the species that held grudges? Or were they the species that did the right thing even when it was hard? The council had failed that test. Would humanity fail too? President Bayek listened to everyone. Then she made her decision. She would put it to a vote in the human government. This decision was too important for one person. The elected representatives of humanity would choose. The debate in the human legislature lasted 3 days. Every argument was made. Every perspective was heard. Citizens watched the proceedings and argued among themselves. This was the defining moment of humanity's place in the galaxy. Some humans wanted permanent isolation. Let the galaxy burn. Focus only on human prosperity. Others wanted unconditional help. Show the galaxy that humans were better than the council. Most fell somewhere in between. The final vote was close. Humanity would intervene, but on completely new terms. Humans would not rejoin the council. They would not submit to external authority. They would not forget what happened. But they would help because it was right. President Bayek announced the Humanitarian Compact. Species could request specific aid. Humanity would grant or deny requests case by case. Recipients must agree to reform treaties. They must accept human observers. They must contribute resources once they recovered. This was cooperation, not charity. The terms were tough but fair. Species that had dismissed humans would now operate on human terms. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Some species objected to the conditions. Beck told them they were free to refuse help. No one refused. Dr. Lee's medical teams prepared to deploy. They had vaccines for the plague. They had treatment protocols. They had supplies stockpiled for this moment. Captain Hana Choi would command the medical fleet. She was 40 now and had seen humanity go from rejected to essential. It felt strange. Ambassador Kim agreed to return to diplomatic service. Just this once, he said. Just to establish the new system. Then he would retire for good. He traveled to what remained of Concord Prime. The station was now a refugee center. Millions of displaced people lived in its corridors. Kim met with Senator Vornt in a simple office. No grand chambers. No ceremonies. Just 2 people trying to fix a broken galaxy. Vornt thanked him for coming. Kim said there was nothing to thank him for. Humanity was doing this for themselves as much as for others. They discussed the practical arrangements. Which species would receive help first? What reforms were required? How to rebuild basic infrastructure. It was tedious work, but it was important work. The galaxy would not heal quickly, but maybe it could heal correctly. Back on Earth, Ji-won watched news reports of human ships deploying across the galaxy. She felt relieved. Humanity had chosen compassion over vengeance. They had chosen to be the better species. But she also knew this was not forgiveness. This was pragmatic cooperation. Trust would take generations to rebuild. The galaxy had learned an expensive lesson. Dismissing entire species had consequences. Arrogance led to disaster. Systems built on assumed superiority were fragile. Now they would learn if they could build something better. And humanity had learned something too. They learned their own worth. They learned they did not need the galaxy's approval. They learned they could walk away and survive. Most importantly, they learned they could choose to help not because they were obligated, but because it was who they wanted to be.